Welcome to our Spirited Conversations. You were just listening to Come to the Woods, composed by our guest, Jake Runestad. Hello, I'm Jim Vrecchia, Executive Director of Atlanta Master Chorale. And on behalf of the chorale, I want to welcome you to this program. We continue our spirit of organizational mission to inspire and enrich the lives of our community. We're so grateful to so many supporters who financially support the chorale and our ongoing programming. Today's guest is a very well-known and respected composer, conductor, educator, clinician, rock star. So let's get to the conversation. I'm now welcoming Eric Nelson, our chorale's artistic director, who will open the program and bring Jake to the screen.
Thank you, Jim. This is a day I've been looking forward to, and I'm very excited to introduce Jake Runestad to those of you that are on the call today. I suspect that many of you are not being introduced to Jake, that you already know him well. I've been a fan of Jake's music since I first heard it, and immediately upon hearing it, he's one of those composers that makes me as a conductor think I need to program this piece I just heard the first chance I get. And in fact, Atlanta Master Chorale has done quite a few of Jake's pieces, including the one you were just listening to. We're going to play another clip of it in a couple of minutes. Come to the Woods. The most recent piece of his that we did was called When Silence Haunts Me, which was a piece for choir and piano also that gave us an insight into what it was like for Beethoven at a time when he was losing his hearing. Come to the Woods was a piece that gave us an insight into what the world was like for John Muir, the naturalist that we credit for being the person who helped to get the idea of America's national parks up and running. So I'll stop there and get Jake on the call here and explain how we commissioned him to do a new piece that we're going to premiere this weekend. Hi, Jake.
Hello, hello. It's great to be here with you.
We are very happy to have you here. Do you want to tell a little bit of how this got started, or shall I? The people are going to be much more interested to hear you talk than me.
Well, I'm trying to remember the first conversation because I know that you've done some of my other pieces, and I was always so thrilled with those performances. But I can't remember when we first started talking about doing a new piece. I know I was down here in Atlanta for another project, and then we met up. But maybe you can tell the details about about that.
So the genesis of it, even before I began to talk with you, is that one of our choristers, Claire Berger, is a physicist, teaches at Georgia Tech, runs a lab there. And we just had a casual conversation, as happens between me and many of the choristers after a rehearsal, when she was saying, Eric, it's interesting. So I'm putting words in her mouth, but as I remember the conversation, she was saying, I was thinking about the music that we have sung over the years, and we do music by women composers and by women poets, and that women, when they're the subject of the piece, are often praised for their beauty or some kind of object of affection and love. And then there's the Ave Maria type pieces. And she said, I can't ever remember doing a piece about a person like me, a person like a woman scientist, a professional person that's accomplished in the world. Why don't we do some of those pieces, she said to me. And I thought about that conversation for weeks afterwards, because as I told her at the time, it's not that I was avoiding them, it's that I didn't know that they existed. And I remembered how beautifully you captured the essence of John Muir in Come to the Woods, and Beethoven's pain of losing his hearing in A Silence Haunts Me. And I thought, I wonder if Jake would be willing to take on this project, to write a new piece with a woman scientist at its heart. And so as I remember it, I called you, and we had a spirited conversation about whether you could fit this into your schedule of composing. So maybe you could talk about once you accepted the commission, how did it go from there?
Well, I do remember early on that you gave me a PDF that Claire had sent you of various quotes by different scientists. And so she had thrown together some ideas. And so immediately, my brain goes to, okay, well, the most important thing with a project like this is what's the text going to be? And I'm really, really picky with the texts that I choose.
It's part of the reason we love your pieces.
Good. And so I know that she had one Mariah Mitchell quote in the sheet that she had given you, which you then gave to me. And I went and researched all the people that she had included. And I had looked up some of my own, of just lots of possibilities for people that I could focus on. And of course, there are so many extraordinary women throughout history, and so many extraordinary women scientists. But as I was reading more and more, I just really fell in love with the writing of Mariah Mitchell. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with her, she was born on Nantucket Island in the 19th century US. Her dad was an amateur astronomer, and so they had a lot of equipment at home, and he would have the kids up on the roof looking at the stars. And so from a very young age, she was very curious about the skies. She was largely self-taught. She did a lot of studying on her own. At a pretty young age, she discovered a comet and kind of became famous for that. And then the more work she did, she was a calculator for the US Navy kind of naval system, so helping ships to navigate using the stars. She would calculate various numbers that, you would be on the sea using a sextant, this device that you would look at the horizon and the sun, and you'd be able to calculate where you were. So she was just a really important figure in US scientific history. And she also wrote really beautifully. And so what I settled on is I found this article that she wrote for this magazine called Hours at Home. And she tells the story of, in 1869, she took some of her students from Vassar College, where she taught. She was a founding faculty member. She took them to Iowa to experience a total solar eclipse. And they brought various telescopes and equipment. It was quite the production. They took a train across the country, and they observed this eclipse. So her writing was about that experience. And, some of it is kind of technical, but also some of it is just about the joy of seeing the various kinds of light that one experiences with an eclipse. Because at this point she knew all about eclipses but had not seen one. And so it was just an extraordinary moment for her of learning so much about something, and finally she gets to know exactly what it's like to be there and to see this light and to feel the air change and the light change. And I get chills thinking about that. So I knew that was going to be the central image. And so I took this article and I was, going through and highlighting various lines that I thought would be great. So then I constructed this text from that article, and also from a few other quotes that she had written, or, gave in a lecture or a speech somewhere. Just an extraordinary individual. And so it was so fun to learn about her. I read a couple books about her, to read all of her writings, to learn about how influential she was as a teacher, as a scientist. So yeah, that's a little bit about the genesis of the text for the piece.
I would think that some people would be surprised that, well, it's impressive that you would have constructed the libretto, the text for this piece on your own from these various sources. But having done so, I think it might surprise some people that that wasn't kind of the end of the prep work, right? That you went to that next level to feel like you needed to read more about her and more of her writings to get a sense of who she is.
I'm going to jump in to just say that another wonderful part of the collaboration, and I know Jake was part of the conversation, was with the Mariah Mitchell Association, the museum up in Nantucket. And had the opportunity to work with Jason Finger, the curator, and she has been just more than helpful, I know, in conversations with Jake and with conversations with me in just preparing for this great moment of this premiere. So I just want to give them a little shout out here while we're right in that preparation stage, because I know we had a Zoom call with them, and it was a, if you could say, a really fun conversation, and that opened up the door for me to think about who this person was. I had never heard of Mariah Mitchell. And, then I learned so much more, not only about her and the science, but of all of her contributions for women, in that period of time, which was unusual. And I suddenly realized I want to learn more about her. So, his fascination turned into my fascination. So it was great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Jake's trying to figure out how to get back on the call. Amy, this would be a good chance, I think, for us to play a little clip from a piece that we've now mentioned a couple of times, Come to the Woods, which was where Jake did something similar with the writings of the American naturalist John Muir, from a piece that we've now mentioned a couple of times, Come to the Woods, which was where Jake did something similar with the writings of the American naturalist John Muir. Hey, he's back. Hey there.
Sorry about that. I think the internet kicked me off here.
Not a problem. I'm glad you're back. I was just saying, as we anticipated, maybe it was going to be another minute for you to get back. This would be a good chance for us to listen to a little clip from Come to the Woods. Wasn't the process somewhat similar when you decided to do the Muir piece of collecting his writings and deciding how to put together a libretto for that as well?
Yeah, and really I don't know how much you caught of what I said previously, but every piece is like a research project for me.
Okay.
And so, I'm learning about the person who wrote the words so that when it comes time to create the music, I'm fully informed about their life, because all of those details, where they lived, when they lived, what was going on in their life, in the world at that time, all of that context is so crucial, so that when I create the music, I want to make sure it's representing who that person was and what was the essence their person, their spirit, the work that they did. So I spent a really, really long time. I read a couple books about Mariah Mitchell. I was in touch with the Mariah Mitchell Museum on Nantucket Island, getting resources from them, learning more from them, and then just reading a lot of her writings so that I could try to. I even taught myself how to use a sextant in order to assess my location, because I just wanted to try to understand the work that she did. And I don't have a mathematical brain, so that took a little bit to learn. I think I have diagrams still of like me trying to write it down and figure it all out. But lots of YouTube videos and things like that. But I think that that's really crucial, because then, as I said, when I start to create the music after all this research, after getting the text, I feel like it's informed, it's fully informed by this person, and I hope that I can then capture their spirit in a more organic and authentic way.
It's just fantastic. Do you own a sextant now?
No, I don't, but I I thought about getting one, actually. Actually, I've thought about getting a telescope because of all this, because I've just become so fascinated. And what's really interesting is I finished the piece in December of 2020 on the final total solar eclipse of that year. That day, I was watching it live on TV, and I just had chills the whole time thinking about her and everything else that was going on with it. So that was a pretty cool moment.
That is amazing. Well, let's suspend our conversation about Mariah Mitchell and this piece for just a minute for the context of John Muir and Come to the Woods. I remember in a documentary that Ken Burns put together about America's national parks, talking about John Muir a lot, because he's a central figure in that story. And the narrator telling the story of that John Muir writes about a storm coming, and rather than running for shelter as the rest of us would do, he climbed the tree to get a better look at the storm. And I think he said to kind of feel what it would be like to be a tree in a storm. It's just an amazing thing to do. And you capture that moment in Come to the Woods, where the winds are blowing and tossing back and forth. I think the text is backwards and forwards, round and round in this wild sea of pine. Bending
and swirling. Yeah.
So that's the section we're going to play. Let's listen to that for those that may not know this piece or know Jake's style. This will give you a sense of a little bit of what Jake's musical language is, and then we'll talk more about this weekend's new commission. Such beautiful writing, Jake.
Thanks.
Does it still make you happy to hear this piece after it's been a number of years now since you've written it?
Absolutely. Of course. They're all my babies.
So you mentioned to me yesterday when we chatted that someone like me calls you and says, I'd like to commission you to write a piece that does something similar to what you did in Come to the Woods for John Muir, and that's a bit of a catch-22 for you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think, it's intimidating to think about trying to write another piece that might be as good as a piece I've already written. There's a lot of pressure. And not to say that you put that pressure on me, because that's not, I know you weren't asking for another Come to the Woods. But it's, I think every time I have a new piece, it's like, how am I going to make something that's any good? Like, have I already given all my good ideas to these other pieces? So that blank manuscript paper is intimidating. But I think what's helpful, especially for a project like this, is when I engage so deeply with the topic, just in the way that I did with Mariah Mitchell, and I get so excited about it, that just helps so much. And I think it makes the music stronger and richer. So for me, that's a great joy.
Manuscript paper. Do you still write with pencil and paper?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I find the computer to be too limiting. So most of what I do is sometimes at the piano, sometimes just walking around singing. But whenever I'm creating vocal music, instrumental music sometimes too, I always generate the material with my voice. And so, once I've got the text set, I'm improvising, singing the words until I find just the right musical material for a piece. So, like for this piece, for example, one of the lines early on is, our instruments consisted of an equatorially mounted telescope of 4 inches aperture. And it's like, well, I've never set anything like that before. And I don't know many choirs that have sung words like that. And they're so fun to wrap your mouth around. And actually, that line is where I derived the main musical motive for this piece. So I was singing, our instruments consisted of an equatorially mounted telescope. How do I sing it? Our instruments consisted of an equatorially mounted telescope of 4 inches aperture. So I found that theme. I was like, so let's see. Which then became, there were variations on that theme that I used then throughout the piece. So that was a fun little nugget to discover.
It is such a lovely shaped line, and fun to say, fun to sing as well. And it's just so, it's one of the things that you do, all composers, many composers, most composers do, is to set up a motive and then bring it back at various times. And you're just brilliant about bringing it back at just the right time. And it may be in a slightly different context than before. And there's several, it's not the only one, there's several motives in this piece that it hangs on. Can you talk a little bit more about writing this piece in particular? Did it come quickly? Did it take a while? Was there, some people would assume that one writes a novel from the opening line of chapter 1, and then you write it through the end of the novel. And if you talk to a novelist, they say that that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
I think J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter books, at one point in an interview said that she had written the last line of the last book while she was still writing, 1 or 2, and knew where she was going to end. And sometimes there's a middle character change that you got to write to and write away from. For you, does it kind of unfold from beginning to end, or does it come in episodes for you?
It's a mixture of all of those things. I think it's well, when I was creating the text, I remember that I had little bits, and I print them out, on paper, each little bit, and I laid them out on my dining room table, and I moved them around to see, okay, what's the right order here? And so that helps me to kind of figure out what the emotional journey or narrative journey is in the piece. And I knew that there would be this Virgil quote that Mariah Mitchell knew very well that I would use at the end of the piece, which is, "Give me the ways of wandering stars to know the depths of heaven above and the earth below." And it's just a beautiful meditation to close the piece. So I knew that was going to be there. But I think I probably began just with the opening in that part that I just sang for you earlier. And when I discovered that theme, then I realized I could use that theme for the very closing, for the give me, so I can play it. Give me the ways of wandering stars to know the depths of heaven above and the earth below, which is the same theme from the telescope thing, but slowed down, made a little bit more legato. So once I discovered that it worked for that line too, then I just found all of these bridges in the piece. And then also I'm thinking a lot about, with this piece, most of my music, I think about this, but especially with a piece like this, where what does it feel like in the space? You know, I don't compose just for sound alone. You know, I don't want this just to be recorded and only heard on a recording. This is a concert piece, so it's to be experienced. So I include a lot of stage directions and lighting cues in this piece. And I've done some stage or movement things, but I've never done lighting. And so it was, once I knew that it was going to be in your hall and I knew there was some lighting capabilities, that was exciting for me to think about. Because, you know, this piece is about experiencing an eclipse. And so I think anything that we could use to help with that drama was really crucial. So I did have the concept early on of, at some point, being able to surround the audience with sound, because when you're viewing an eclipse, you get this 360-degree sunset, which is an extraordinary thing to see. And so I wanted to represent that with sound in some way. So I knew that we'd have to get the choir into the audience somehow. And then just, you know, if I'm zooming out and thinking, what are the main concepts of the piece? Eclipse is a main concept. And so then I had the idea of the choir throughout the piece, eclipsing the audience. And also through the piece, there's this tension between tenors and basses and sopranos and altos, because in her time, Mariah, as a woman, she faced a lot of difficulty as a scientist at that point in history. There was this a guy at Harvard who wrote a paper about how women shouldn't be educated the same as men, because if they use their brains too much, the blood will flow from their uterus to their brain and they'll become infertile. These are the kinds of things that she was battling. And so through the piece, I wanted to somehow show that. So there's this constant kind of crossing and eclipsing that occurs between tenors and basses and sopranos and altos throughout the piece at any given moment. So I knew those were going to be the main thematic ideas that I would play with. And then, of course, there's what I think you were calling like the whole tone kind of harmonic. So if you think about whole tone scale, it's like what you hear in the dream sequence in movies, you know, it's like that kind of thing. But it has this expansiveness to it. So a lot of my harmonies are leaning into that sort of a sound world. Lots of shimmering light-based colors and textures. And so those were the building blocks of the piece that I thought about early on.
And Atlanta Master Chorale is very fortunate to have a fantastic keyboard artist, Jonathan Easter, who plays piano and organ for us often in the same performance. And in fact, he's playing piano and organ and celesta in this performance this weekend. And so having someone who can play anything you write for him is a nice bonus as well.
Yeah, and I knew that going into it because of his work on Come to the Woods. And so yeah, I knew that I could give him something he could sink his teeth into. For sure.
I hesitate to give too much away for the folks that are going to be able to come this weekend, but some folks on the call are obviously not going to be able to come this weekend for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And so I'll risk talking about this as well. So you said that there's some lighting cues to kind of hint at the eclipse and the lighting changes that happen during an eclipse. And that the choir at one point is going to come off the stage and surround the audience to give them a sense of the 360-degree-ness of the light change in the sunset. But while the choir is out there, some of them are not just singing, to also give a sense of something which is unusual, something that's other. And I'm curious if you can describe for our listeners what that is and how you came upon that idea.
Yeah. Voices alone, I love that texture of just voices, but I think I wanted something that would shimmer in a different way. So I have the choir playing handbells, but not just ringing them. You actually, if you know, like a singing metal bowl, or like a crystal glass, you put your finger and you rub it around. You can take a handbell and you can hold it, and you can take a wooden dowel and you can scrape it on the edge of the bell, and it creates this beautiful humming color. So for me, it's this ethereal, floating in space kind of sound that I really wanted, because this you can see the stars in this experience too. So that's what I was attempting to evoke. And there are some little triangles that are played at random in some various places within the choir as well. So it's really, my hope was to create a soundscape that might invite you to experience the sky in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my hope is that maybe this causes someone to be more curious. And when they walk outside after the concert, maybe they spend a little time looking up and wondering. And so, yeah, and it's, I think that's what's so fun about composing, is to try to find these kinds of sound textures and colors to try to evoke these kinds of things. Like, let's see. Yeah, I guess maybe handbells and some triangles, all these twinkly sounds.
Yeah. Well, but what's extraordinary about your music is that while it is creative and fresh and brilliantly evocative of the subject matter at hand, it is beautiful. And an audience member who has experienced this piece this weekend for the very first time, who hasn't studied the score and may not know anything about, music theory and form and analysis, will, I believe, be moved by the music and the text and the experience of it all. And I'm just so, I'm kind of grateful to be alive and have the main part of my professional career be at a time when composers like you writing choral music are writing music which is on some level experimental, sure, but so beautiful. And I know when I was in college, kind of when a new piece was written, it was usually filled with dissonance to the point where it was hard to appreciate it, or kind of hard to find the beauty in it. It may have been there, but it's kind of harder to find. So
sure.
I'm so grateful that your music is somehow not derivative, right? Not cliched. It sounds like you, but still can be approached. That has to be intentional on some level, right? For you, the language you choose, you're thinking about the listener.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love beautiful music, and I've heard some conversations with composers, and someone I ask, do you listen to your own music? And some composers are like, oh, no, I never listen to my own music. And I think, well, then why are you making it? I love listening to my own music. And I don't think that that's like a pompous thing. I think because I want to create things that I love and that I want to hear, that I think hopefully other people would then want to hear. So, the other part of that is I am very aware of my listeners, and with every piece, there's a new vocabulary that I have to introduce to the listener. So what I try to do is guide them into that vocabulary. So not to make them feel completely unaware right away, but I have to introduce something that's memorable, they can latch onto, and then help them watch that as it proceeds through and progresses throughout the piece. So that's my goal, is that I introduce something to the listener, they can feel comfortable with it, they can watch it. It might stretch, and move in some places that might go, might not be familiar territory for some listeners, but I hope it's never alienating. But then there will be something that returns that'll be familiar, so that I think it does take them on this journey, and we're all in it together. That's my hope.
I think that your music and Atlanta Master Chorale are such fantastic partners. And you and I are closely related, because I think about that a lot as the artistic director of Atlanta Master Chorale, of what pieces we're going to sing. And you talked about having the text that you found from Mariah Mitchell on your dining room table, moving him around. And I do that for way more time than people might think is necessary in trying to decide what pieces to put on a program, and which one is the first one, and how's the closer going to be, and what's the journey in between, and is it too many slow pieces in a row, and all that, and is the choir going to enjoy the experience? They're so talented and so artful. Is there music that they're going to be moved by, and music that they're going to find challenging and worth giving up a chunk of their life on Tuesday night to learn? But I'm very much thinking about the audience and their experience of all of these pieces. And part of why I love programming your music, because I'm able to give them that gift of whatever you've taken on to have us experience together. For those that are coming this weekend, the title of the entire concert is "The Ways of Stars," taken from the title you gave to the commission, which, as you've said, comes from the Virgil quote, right? "Teach me the ways of wandering stars." And so all of the music at the concert this weekend is going to be star related. And some songs that people are going to recognize right away, some staples of the choral repertoire, and some things that are off to one side. And so for us, it's been, for me in putting the concert together, and for us as a choir, it's been a wonderful month to think about some of the things that you said that your study of Mariah Mitchell led you to, of just considering the heavens and the cosmos, and what it gives us a perspective, doesn't it? And kind of in our place in the world and with each other. And so that's been our experience as a choir since our last concert in January as well. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And, hearing your rehearsal last night was thrilling for me. I came early so I could hear the first piece you were doing, and then stayed because I was just so taken by what you're doing. But also, just for audiences that are maybe interested in this program, of course, I'm preaching to the choir. I know that. But I was, and I'm not just saying this either, but I was completely blown away. The experience of this piece is more than I had imagined it would be. The lighting is beyond what I had hoped for. Some basic, let's bring the lights up here, lights down here. Maybe if you've got some other effects, you could put it here, but it's extraordinary what you've created. And I had chills and tears as you were just the first time going through the piece. And usually for me, in like my first rehearsal, I'm in like problem solving technique mode. So like, okay, do I need to fix this? I'm listening for all this stuff, looking at my score. But with this, I felt like I could settle in and experience the piece. A piece that I've been waiting over a year to hear. I finished in December of 2020. So there's an anxiousness about that too. But gosh, I'm just so pleased and can't wait for audiences to to hear this, it truly is a piece that you need to be in the hall to get the full experience of. There's no recording that can capture this, just because it's a space based and not just like outer space, but like the space that we're in, physical kind of piece. So I'm just so excited to share it this weekend.
Thank you. Jim, are there any questions from our listeners that you have for Jake?
There are some questions, and actually I was going to start with a question I had, and Jake just answered the question without me asking it, because in the conversation he and I had with the museum, the curator said to him, well, I haven't heard the piece, and Jake jumped in and he said, well, neither have I.
Right.
And I was watching him last night across the aisle as he was listening to his piece come alive. And it was inspiring for me to sit there and watch. So now let me get to the questions. We have several. Meg asks one or two here. When working with choirs on commissions such as this, how much of their individual sound or timbre influences your writing, if any, or are there other influences into crafting the ideal sound or color of the given piece? You kind of touched on that.
It's very influential. If I'm writing a piece for a large symphonic chorus, upwards of 80 to 100 people, it's a very different approach that I have to take, because that kind of an ensemble, if you think of it like a yacht versus a kayak, there's a nimbleness that can be achieved with a smaller choir versus a larger group. I wouldn't write a lot of really close harmonies for a really, really large choir, just because of the nature of the way that sound is produced. So when I knew I was writing for Atlanta Master Chorale, I knew what they could do, and I knew the intricacies that I was able to use, the way I balance and write harmonies. So it really is kind of a custom-made piece for them. But that can, of course, can be done by lots of other people, and I hope will be done by lots of other people. But that is one of the joys. If I'm writing for a collegiate group, that might be a different kind of thing. Sometimes I get a commission where it's a consortium. So it's, 30 different choirs from around the state of Ohio, which I had once. And I can't, really customize the piece to one specific group. So there has to be a little bit of more general thought into how I create it. But I think that that's a fun challenge. And I also think it's really important for every composer to have a clear idea of what an ensemble's strengths are, how big they are, the kind of tone that they produce, all those kinds of things. So yeah, those all play into how I create.
And Eric touched on this to a degree earlier in the conversation about composing this particular piece, but we all know that you compose a lot of pieces or are commissioned to do a lot of things. So do you work on one at a time, is the question Meg also asks, or do you finish one, or do you work on several simultaneously?
If I tried to work on more than one at a time, I think they would all bleed together. So I might be looking for texts or kind of planning a future project, but when it's composing, I just compose one at a time. I think a big part of that is because I enter so deeply into the world of the writer of the text of that piece. And so it's really hard to pull myself out of it and then try to enter into a different world. Especially when I'm near the end of writing a piece, I just disappear. Friends, I tell them, I was like, all right, just so you know, I'm going to disappear for the next 2 weeks. Let's see, back in December, I was finishing my first symphony, and there was a week where I was just, close to the deadline, just had to finish. So I had one friend that sent me a dinner one night, had it delivered. My parents are also in Minnesota where I live. And I was like, Mom, can you bring me dinner one night? Because it's like, I can't even think about food. It's just, I'm just so deep in the world of a piece. So yeah, one piece at a time, for sure.
we have primarily two questions from Bronson. He asks, whom did you rule out and then chose Mariah? Because there's some other interesting characters you might have thought about. And then, not related, but which three composers has affected your own unique sound and style?
You know, as with any piece, there's so many different options, ways to go. And I think, you know, in all the research that I did, of course, there's so many extraordinary people that I could have written about. But I wanted to use the words written by the person. And not all words sing well, can and should be set to music. But what I found in Mariah's writing was that there was a clarity to them that lends themselves to be set to music for choir or to be sung. And so, of course, first and foremost, just who she was, but then finding her words and how much I loved them, that was just the perfect marriage. So that's why I chose to go with her. And then as far as other composers, oh my gosh. So there's so many, you know, from a really early age, it was a lot of the great folk singer-songwriters. We listened at home, you know, James Taylor, and then a lot of the Beatles we listened to. I wasn't really exposed to much classical music until later on, and I was a band guy. I was in some children's choirs when I was really, really young, but then I wasn't in an SATB choir until sophomore year of college. So I played saxophone, and that was the most of the stuff that I did. A lot of pop music. I loved Dave Matthews Band and Ben Folds throughout high school. And then looking at choral music, you know, I think as for many people around my age, Eric Whitaker was really influential early on. Dominic Argento. Libby Larson is the mentor that really encouraged me to pursue composition and go to graduate school for it. So I just am so grateful and such a big admirer of her. There's so many composers: Beethoven, Ravel, Esperanza Spalding, Becca Stevens, Ray Fun Williams. I could go on and on.
Nice.
Okay. Eric, that's it for the questions for the moment.
All righty. Jake, it has been a joy and a thrill to learn your piece. I was the first one, well, the second one. You wrote the piece, sent it to me, and I was the first person other than you to experience this piece and learn this piece first inside my head and heart, and then got to bring it to life in rehearsal and then share that with you in our rehearsal last evening. And I just want to thank you for how that has enriched my life. In preparation for this weekend, I want to thank you on behalf of Atlanta Master Chorale and the audiences who are going to experience this piece in the future. I want to thank you for saying yes. You have a very busy composition life, and it would have been perfectly understandable if you had said, thank you very much. Cool idea. I hope you find somebody to do it. I'm too busy. No. And instead you said, yes, I will take this project on and make it part of my compositional life and output. And we will be forever grateful that you said yes. So thank you, Jake, very much.
Thank you, Eric. It's you know, it's such a beautiful culture that you've created with this group. And so I feel warmly welcomed into the family, and I knew that it was going to be a really positive experience. So there's a lot of trust that I have with all of you, and that means a lot for the creative work that I do. And then last night, just to be blown away. I hope everyone in Atlanta can come to these concerts, because they're going to be extraordinary. So thanks for making this happen, and yeah, can't wait to share it.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Eric, for joining us today and for this wonderful concert that you're going to be part of this weekend. So there are the pieces. I shout out to the Mariah Mitchell Association in Nantucket again for their collaboration in helping us get ready for this premiere. Check out their website, mariahmitchell.org. You can learn a lot about Mariah Mitchell. Tickets are still available for the concert. And there is a live stream for those of you who are not in the local area to be able to enjoy this new premiere. Everything can be found on our website, atlantamasterchorale.org/concerts. Thank you to all who joined us, and we hope you'll be able to be with us this weekend, either live or online. Have a great day.